This is your day one video. Your essential question is, why did the Montgomery bus boycott succeed? This is a two-day activity that is intended to see what type of argument writing students do using these sources. On day one, you will have 50 minutes. Listen to me read the sources or read the sources yourself. Pause after each source to highlight important information and complete your thinking questions. On day two, you will have 50 minutes. Write an argument responding to the essential question. Use evidence from the sources. Write your argument. Source 1, Bus Boycott Timeline. Source 2, Joanne Robinson's Memoir. Source 3, Bayard Rustin's Diary. And Source 4, Rosa Parks' Biography. Note, to help you write an argument about why the boycott succeeded, first read these sources like a historian. Ask yourself, who wrote the source? When? Where? Why? How does the time and place that the source was created impact its content? Where do sources agree? Where do the sources disagree with each other? Why? Headnote. To fight injustice, individuals and groups have used public platforms to express their views and act to address social issues they see as important. One strategy to produce change is a boycott, a protest where people do not buy goods or services due to moral, social, or political reasons. Background. Like many U.S. cities in 1955, Montgomery, Alabama's city buses were segregated. This meant that the first 10 rows of seats were reserved for white people, while black people were forced to sit or stand in the rear of the bus. This was one of the many discriminatory laws that negatively affected the lives of black people during the 1950s. The Women's Political Council, WPC, black leaders and other groups formed the Montgomery Improvement Association on December 5, 1955, to end segregation and to move towards equal rights for black citizens. The MIA's weekly public meetings were attended by thousands of people. They helped organize the Montgomery bus boycott, which occurred after the arrest of Rosa Parks. For months, the city buses were almost empty because large numbers of black customers participated in the Montgomery bus boycott. This ended in the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that segregation on public buses is unconstitutional and illegal. Here is an image from a website, blackpast.org. People are walking in Montgomery, Alabama instead of riding the bus. Source 1, Bus Boycott Timeline. Headnote. This timeline shows events from before the boycott to the Supreme Court ruling that segregation on public buses is unconstitutional and illegal. March 1955. Black leaders in Montgomery, including Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and the Women's Political Council, meet with city officials to recommend changes for the Montgomery bus system. December 1, 1955. Rosa Parks is arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger. December 2, 1955. The WPC distributed thousands of handouts to black people urging them to stay off the buses in a one-day boycott. December 5, 1955. After a successful one-day boycott, the Montgomery Improvement Association is founded to continue the boycott. December 13, 1955. The MIA, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rufus Lewis, created a carpool system to support citizens taking part in the boycott. June 5, 1956. The Supreme Court's orders of injunction against segregation on city buses are delivered to the Montgomery City Hall. December 21, 1956. Montgomery's buses are officially desegregated. The Montgomery Improvement Association ends the boycott. Source note. A timeline of the Montgomery bus boycott was published on beaconbroadside.com. A website for a publishing company. Pause your video for 5 minutes to complete your thinking questions. Ask yourself, according to the source, what helped the boycott succeed? What evidence from the source makes you think this? Explain why this is important for the success of the boycott. How useful is the source for thinking about why the boycott succeeded? Is the evidence reliable, trustworthy, and relevant? Source 2, Joanne Robinson's Memoir. Headnote. After unsuccessful meetings with Montgomery officials, black leaders sought other ways to create change. After Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white passenger, Black leaders decided to boycott city buses. Joanne Robinson, the president of the Women's Political Council, explains how she and others produced and distributed a handout to thousands of Black people, urging them to stay off the buses on Monday morning, December 5, 1955. I sat down, wrote a message, and then called a good friend and colleague who had access to the college's printing equipment. When I told him that the Women's Political Council was staging a boycott and needed to print the handouts, he told me that he too had suffered embarrassment on the city buses. Along with two of my most trusted senior students, we quickly agreed to meet in the middle of the night at the college's copy room. We were able to get 3 handouts to a page in order to make thousands of handouts we knew would be needed. By 4 a.m. Friday, the handouts had been made. Between 4 and 7 a.m., the 2 students and I mapped out distribution routes for the handouts. Some of the WPC officers previously had discussed how and where to deliver thousands of paper handouts, announcing a boycott, and those plans were helpful to me. After class, my 2 students and I quickly finalized our plans for distributing the thousands of handouts so that one would reach every Black home in Montgomery. I took out the WPC membership roster and called everyone. I told them about the need to distribute the handouts and then helped distribute them to the community. We spent the day dropping off thousands of handouts. Some were dropped off at schools, some were dropped off at business places, storefronts, salons, factories, barbershops, and every other available place. Workers would pass along handouts both to other employees as well as to customers. By 2 o'clock, thousands of handouts had been given to many people. Practically every Black man, woman, and child in Montgomery knew the plan and was passing the word along. Source note: this excerpt came from Joanne Robinson's memoir, The Montgomery Bus Boycott and the Women Who Started It. Joanne Robinson was present during the boycott and a member of the WPC. Pause your video for 5 minutes to complete your thinking questions. Ask yourself, according to the source, what helped the boycott succeed? What evidence from the source makes you think this? Explain why this is important for the success of the boycott. How useful is the source for thinking about why the boycott succeeded? Is the evidence reliable, trustworthy, and relevant? Source 3. Bayard Rustin's diary. Headnote: without the use of city buses, many Black citizens had to find other means of transportation, such as carpools. Bayard Rustin, a Black gay civil rights activist, traveled to Montgomery to advise Dr. King and the Montgomery Improvement Association and support the bus boycott. He kept a diary of what he found. February 24th. 42,000 Black citizens had not ridden the buses since December 5th. On December 6th, the police began to harass, intimidate, and arrest Black taxi drivers who were helping get these people to work. It thus became necessary for the Black leaders to find an alternative: the carpool. They set up 23 locations where people could gather to wait for free transportation. This morning, Rufus Lewis, the director of the carpool and member of the MIA, invited me to attend the meeting of the drivers. On the way, he explained that there are 3 methods in addition to the carpool for moving the Black population. 1. Hitchhiking. 2. The transportation of servants by white housewives. 3. Walking. Later, he introduced me to 2 men, one of whom had walked 7 miles and the other 14 miles every day since December 5th. The success of the carpool is at the heart of the movement, Lewis said at the meeting. It must not be stopped. I wondered what the response of the drivers would be, since 28 of them had just been arrested on charges of conspiring to destroy the bus company. One by one, they pledged that, if necessary, they would be arrested again and again. This excerpt is from Bayard Rustin's Montgomery Diary, February 24, 1956. He traveled to Montgomery and described the ongoing boycott, which began months before he arrived. Pause your video for 5 minutes to complete your thinking questions. Ask yourself, according to the source, what helped the boycott succeed? What evidence from the source makes you think this? Explain why this is important for the success of the boycott. How useful is this source for thinking about why the boycott succeeded? Is the evidence reliable, trustworthy, and relevant? Source 4. Rosa Parks' Biography. Headnote: in 1955, Rosa Parks was an established leader in the civil rights movement. Parks not only showed resistance by refusing to move from her bus seat, she also helped plan the Montgomery bus boycott. Many have tried to diminish Parks' role in the boycott by depicting her as a seamstress who simply did not want to move because she was tired. Parks denied the claim and years later revealed her true motivation, which is included in the following article. Rosa Parks, 1913 to 2005. On December 1, 1955, Parks boarded a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Instead of going to the back of the bus where black passengers sat, she sat in the front. When the bus started to fill up with white passengers, the driver asked Parks to move. She refused. Her resistance set in motion one of the largest social movements in history, the Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa Parks was born in 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama. As a young woman, Parks enrolled at Alabama State Teachers College, a college for black students. Growing up in the segregated South, Parks was frequently confronted with racial discrimination and violence. She became active in the civil rights movement at a young age. Parks, with her husband, worked with many social justice organizations. Eventually, Parks was elected secretary of the Montgomery chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. She said, "People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. I was not tired physically, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me as being old. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in." Parks' courageous act and the subsequent Montgomery bus boycott led to the integration of public transportation in Montgomery. Her actions were not without consequence. She was jailed for refusing to give up her seat and lost her job for participating in the boycott. Source note: Rosa Parks, 1913 to 2005, was written by Arlisha Norwood and published by the National Women's History Museum in 2017. Pause your video for 5 minutes to complete your thinking questions. Ask yourself, according to the source, what helped the boycott succeed? What evidence from the source makes you think this? Explain why this is important for the success of the boycott. How useful is this source for thinking about why the boycott succeeded? Is the evidence reliable, trustworthy, and relevant?